Not one, but two big handheld console announcements. That's right, I'm talking about, of course, the Nintendo Switch 2 and also the Atari GameStation Go. That's right. There's been a lot of buzz about the GameStation Go the last few weeks. Of course, officially rolled out for the second time. It's CES this year, and it does look like a beaut. There is quite a lot of potential in this powerful little console. So I figured, why not do the public a service and determine once and for all, if you can only afford to get one of the two big handheld consoles this year, which one should you get? Which one is clearly the superior choice? So we're going to go head to head and judge the Nintendo Switch 2 versus the Atari GameStation Go. Now, I figured the way to do this is we take important factors that should go into your decision-making process, and I've come up with what I believe are the three most important factors you should take into consideration when judging which of two handheld consoles is right for you. Whichever of these two ends up getting the best of 3 points is clearly the superior console, and the one I full-throatedly suggest that you purchase with your hard-earned dollars this year when it comes out. So, let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. We're putting the Nintendo Switch 2 and the Atari GameStation Go up against one another in three important categories. And I thought I'd start off with the first category being controls. That's right, controls. Every good handheld console has good controls. They're ergonomically pleasing, and it's just a dream to play the game with said controls. Now, the Nintendo Switch 2 is interesting in that it seems to be, based on what we know now, largely all of the same controls you knew and loved from the Nintendo Switch, with the exception of these additional strange C button or C square button. Everyone has different theories as to what that's going to do, but at the end of the day, it's a button. It's just a button. So not a lot of innovation from the Switch side. However, on the Atari GameStation Go, while I had some initial reservations about this, I've come to realize that this is probably going to be an amazing console in large part due to the controls. I mean, let's take a look. Being targeted primarily at retro gaming, you have, of course, a cross pad, which could do your basic joystick functions, but you also have a paddle, a built-in paddle control, and a built-in trackball control. Now, in my initial video about the GameStation Go, we hadn't yet had the ability to actually see the unit in action on the CES floor. In the interim, we've had a lot of folks that have gone out to CES, gotten their hands on it, and seen firsthand that trackball is actually pretty good. It seems to be fluid, it's smooth, so that is a fantastic little piece of equipment right there. Of course, we're still not 100% sure about the keypad control on the right side, but you never know, it could be something cool. I gotta be honest with you, if we're talking about controls, I'm gonna give the GameStation Go the nod on this point. So we're at 1-0 in favor of the GameStation Go. Now, the second point I think you have to judge these consoles on is the game library. What games can you play on this system? Well, with the GameStation Go, we have the belief that we're going to have approximately 200 different games available on the system, largely comprised of Atari 2600 titles, but also some 5200, some 7800, some arcade ports of not only Atari, but also Jailco stuff as well. There's a few other cool things. There's some pinball games. There's the Namco version of Pac-Man, and so on and so forth. So it is definitely a good, solid lineup, squarely aimed at the retro fans, squarely aimed at Atari fans, as you would expect. Now, on the other side of the aisle, you've got the Nintendo Switch 2, and we have yet to get the formal announcement of what launch titles will come out with the Switch 2, but you can probably assume there'll be at least a handful of heavy-hitter first-party titles. And in addition, the Nintendo Switch 2 is backward compatible with the original Switch, so we have to consider the entire Switch library in terms of the assortment of games that you can play on that console. And this is where this one is really tough for me. It is super, super hard for me to make this call. Because look, let's face it, I grew up with the Atari. The Atari was my first console, my first love. I have the most sentimental attachment to the games from the Atari 2600. But I have to be honest with myself as well as a grown adult. The quality and the strength and the amazing library on the Nintendo side of the scene, from the Nintendo Switch, which I will presume also means the Nintendo Online service, which then grandfathers in NES games, Super Nintendo games, Game Boy games, Genesis games from Sega, is an absolutely epic catalog. So I'm going to be real and not vote with my heart, but with the reality of the situation. The better game library goes to the Nintendo Switch 2. And that has us tied up here 1-1. And I've got a third category that I think we need to look at when you're talking about judging a handheld. And I'm going to call that the quality of the display. That's right. Obviously, if you are playing on the go, you're going to want a really quality display on your system. Now, the Nintendo Switch 2 is expected to have an 8-inch display. I suspect it'll probably be an OLED display or greater. It's going to be high-tech. It's going to be super cool. However, this is where things get interesting. The Atari GameStation Go was announced and shown with a 7-inch display. But, as you could see in some footage here from the show, the viewing angles on this particular display were absolutely unbelievable, like nothing I've ever seen before, and I've had my hands on a few handhelds. The ability to have great viewing angles on a display is absolutely paramount to having a good experience with that system. So here's the problem. Incredible display, great viewing angles, versus what is going to be a larger screen, which will clearly have more resolution to it. I got to tell you, we could be here all day going back and forth on this. So the only thing I can reasonably do is call it a tie. But wait a minute, hold on. I said best of 3, and now we're knotted up 1-1 in a tie. Wait a minute. That's a classic It's All Dug in Games swerve. That's right. You're familiar with the channel and how I tend to do things. I had a feeling there might be a tie in my best of 3, and that's why, just like in the RoboCop movie, there was a 4th directive. I think that was a 4th directive, right? Like, yeah. Anyhow. Well, I have a 4th hidden criteria in back pocket I'm going to have to pull out for just this situation. And while I'm not known to pull out often, I'm going to pull it out here. So the 4th criteria, and what will finally be the determination of which is clearly the superior handheld console, is how likely am I to be stabbed in a retail store parking lot getting it? And this one, I mean, I think it's a very valid conversation to have. I mean, look, recently scalping has just gotten worse. I mean, while not video game related directly, one only has to look at the recent Costco riots over Pokemon cards. And the idea here being when something releases where there's going to be less supply than demand, people go absolutely bonkers for it. And if the last few Nintendo console launches are anything to use as a frame of reference, there probably will be limited supply for the first run of Nintendo Switch 2 consoles. Ergo, there are probably going to be some really rough situations for folks that want it on day one at retail. And so I have to make the judgment call here, not having been aware of any previous Atari-related riots, at least in the last 40 years, that I am less likely to get stabbed to death getting an Atari GameStation Go on day one than I am battling it out with a hyped-up soccer mom at a Target parking lot for the Switch 2. And so, if I'm being honest, I have to give the nod to the Atari GameStation Go. And that's right. That's what you're thinking. Therefore, according to my absolutely unimpeachable logic, the Atari GameStation Go is the superior handheld console and the one you should purchase in the year 2025. Now, I heard a rumor that sometimes on the internet people tend to disagree. You may not see it the same way as me. Well, lucky for you, we have this comment feature down below the video. I'd love to hear your free expression of what you think about what I had to say here. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like the cut of my jib. And as always, I'll see you next time on It's All Dug in Games. Sit, Duck Dragon, sit. Good Duck Dragon.